All right, well, hello YouTube. Today is the next episode of the Go series, which hasn't been worked on in a while. I've been programming, but I've just been quite busy. So, let's get started. So here are things that have been worked on. Not necessarily done, but have certainly been worked on. The global variable system now actually works for the structs. Network requests are working. I figured out the authorization and then how to do like all the body reading and whatnot. Configuration validation, I'll show that one today. My sanity has been worked on now that Drama Club is over. I actually have time. I've worked on the Cloudflare model, specifically their zone ID retrieval functions, or retrieving the zone ID based on the domain. The interactive command line has been worked on, and then the IP consensus function has been made as well. So yeah, wow. So how did I fix the global variable problem? That's a good question because that was something that I was really stuck on. To be honest, it is a bit more complicated than necessary. Only because I really just didn't want to. I wanted to use the existing function that I had already wrote. But it didn't really work. I ended up having to modify this function either way. So all of this really could have been simplified if all of this code to read it was put into this function instead. But we like to live on the edge, and I think I learned something valuable, which is the memory management. So like pointers, and references. So this is this one here, load configuration to the global var. That's the exported function because it's capitalized, and it'll take the path and it'll return a boolean whether or not I was able to load it, and then it's going to return the configuration file here, and then can set this basically to the contents of. So this is the pointer symbol. It's basically saying this pointer is looking at the contents of whatever's at that memory address. Because in here, we're not returning a configuration object anymore. Rather, we are returning the address of the configuration object, which then becomes used here to set it. Technically, in a sense, it's just what this is. But because these are in two different scopes, you have to reference by memory back into it. However, I do think this all could have been done in here if I just did the reading all in here, and then I was able to, or I would be able to just load it into memory without having to do this. But hey, now you know. Network requests, I was gonna write something here, but I forgot because I would actually rather like us to go look into the actual code again. But here is returning the zone IDs. So I've come to a consensus that I'm going to use the token in all of these, even though technically I do have a global variable where it stores the active token that's being used. I believe that this is better for a functional paradigm where basically it's not accessing data outside of the scope in which it's defined, besides for obvious reasons like type definitions right here. Other than that, everything that's contained in this function gets contained in this function. So here we can see the authorization being done, the actual doing of the request, and then here, this is another struct type. Another type that lives in the global variable file that decodes the body and sets that back into this object so we can then read that object, and then we basically iterate over all the results because a token can have authorization for a lot of different what Cloudflare calls zones, but technically it's just the domain. So like, for example, my domain rainwash.xyz, and say I owned another one, say andrew.lee, something like that. That would basically result in me being allowed to use a bunch of these different zones under one Cloudflare account, but because we're just looking for the specific one that matches the one that we defined in the configuration file, we have to iterate over it and then check if it matches. If it does, then we know that that's the correct ID number, and then we return it. So now I've actually done or wrote a part of the command line interface to read the global variable and kind of make sure that the configuration file follows the specifications we defined. And that was actually quite easy to do because the specification functions have already been defined before as for the other parts of the command line interface where you have to type. Basically, when you want to add a record, for example, to the configuration file, you can do it through an interactive part of the command line utility. And through that, you have to validate each user or each input type, right? The record type, the time till live, the subdomain, etc., etc. And because I already had access to those functions, it was very easy to just copy the code and modify a little bit to match back to what I needed for this. And then we create a table that can be rendered, so it's very easy to read basically the configuration file and the details of it using this library right here, which has been very convenient. And so again, we're still focusing on just Cloudflare for the time being, mainly because that's again what I use personally. And we have CRUD, which stands for create, read, update, and delete. Those are kind of the 4 primary functions of any data. So you would hear that term a lot with like, for example, CRUD web application, or like basically if you were able to build like tutorials will teach you how to make a CRUD website and whatnot. It's just basically referring to being able to do all 4 things to data, which is create, read, update, and delete. And it's basically the most simple kind of way to access data, and in a sense the most fundamental. And then zone authorization will be basically the primary focus of how the authorization part of DDNSU will be. So in Cloudflare, you can generate a token and then set it with permissions. And with those permissions, then you're able to specify down to a specific zone, which we were previously talking about. But technically, also in Cloudflare, you can use an account identification token, which is for the whole account and can access all the resources under that account. However, I do believe that it would be more simple and more secure if the users of DDNSU use a token instead of an account token. Okay, so here we are in some of the code. Let me make it a bit larger so it's easier to read. Again, this is back on my SSH, so you can see some of this code here. I'm going to show off the command line interface part of it. So basically all of that functionality is defined in this main function, obviously, because that's the entry point into our program, as well as under this commands subpackage, where you can see it's basically package commands. You could see, for example, some of these subcommands. So this will be under the configuration command. So for example, DDNSU config view, backup, or reset. Record is the interactive part that I was talking about earlier, where we were able to have these functions here that have the validation that we need. And then here it's actually creating those prompts, and then we're able to it's not fully complete yet, as it will not modify the global dot configuration variable, which stores the configuration, or write it. However, it is interactive, and I do think it would be very simple to do so, because I've done already something similar before, which is here, which is under the on the login command. Basically, if you try to, it will test the token first, and if it's valid, it will say it's valid. It'll first update right here. You can see it updates the global configuration file, or like the configuration file in memory, and then actually do the write to confirm it. So it's going to ask if you want to write to it, and then we can look into the definition of this one. Oh shoot, here. And you can see it's going to show what it's going to change. It'll ask whether or not you want to make that change. It'll run it, and then if yes, what it'll basically do is take that global.configuration representation in memory and then turn that back into a TOML file that can then be written right here. Okay, let's actually write some, or actually show some stuff. So I'm going to open a terminal in editor area. So for Go is primarily done through their own command line, which is the Go command. And then I will cd into the source file here because it has all my Go files. And then first, well, if you want to compile the project, you would do go.compile and then whatever ends in .go here. Oh shoot, not go compile, go build, sorry. So I would be in my root directory, which has the go.mod, the go.sum, and the chess.toml, and then I would run go compile if I actually wanted to. Oh shoot. Sorry, not compile. I'm dumb. I made the same mistake again. Go build. Shoot. Go build. It's gonna say no go.files because there isn't, so we would do go build source/star.go. And then now it's actually gonna build it, and then you can see here it builds a binary, which is the /main, and we can run it like that. However, because if you are doing it might take a while to compile, though Go isn't well known for its ability to compile languages or compile its code very quickly. Even so, you're able to, if you want to compile and execute in the same step, for example, without having to create a temporary file that stores all the executable code, you can use the go run star.go, or sorry, all of it's in the source.go file. And then it basically interacts the exact same way. It compiles the code first, and then will run it immediately in the same line. So this completion command here, that comes default with the Cobra. So if I actually ran it, it'll give me the code necessary to generate, basically, for different kind of shells. But that's beyond the scope of today. So for example, let's do the record. If we run it without anything, it's going to say that it expects one argument, which is the add, delete, or update. And because we didn't put one in, it won't say anything. However, we do the add, for example. Now we can see that interactive part of the prompt being active here. So first is going to ask for the record type. For example, A is an address, quadruple A, which I will not be supporting because that's IPv6, but technically it would be supported. But in terms of the IP consensus that I'm doing right now, that comes from IPv4 sources, so it's not on IPv6 yet. But you could see A, for example, address, MX for mail, TXT for text. Either way, so you can make these record types, and it's going to ask how long or the time till live. So the default is auto here, but otherwise it would be any integer. So if I auto, then subdomain. So for example, this would be match all subdomains. This is the root domain. Other than that, that's any other subdomain. So let's just match the root domain. And then basically comment. This doesn't really matter because this is just extra information for ourselves. But I am working on thinking about how we can differentiate DDNSU generated records from those that were generated from the user. I believe that I will have, like, almost in a sense like a signature that DDNSU will append to whatever comment that you make here. However, I do not want to interrupt the information in it by, for example, appending like a flag DDNSU, though that might be something I have to do. But I really want to see if I can do something nondescriptly, where basically I don't need to write any ASCII characters or anything that's technically visible to the user, but is visible to whatever computer program is organizing or using that text. So yep, and then this is just giving an example of what would be added to that record. However, like I said again, it won't do anything. So here's the login command, and then you have to first tell what login, what source you're using. So we're using Cloudflare. In terms of an actual token would work here. However, I do not want to give away an actual token, so I will just put that. But you can see it basically doesn't work. It panics out because I haven't defined proper code for what it will do if it doesn't work. So yeah, if I do go.run.go or source/source.go, let's see other commands that haven't worked. So this is the test command, and the test command, basically what it does, I will go into it here. It creates a table. Now, I would love to show you. However, it does dox my IP. Actually, I could change it. So this is the make IP consensus function here, which basically, if I go to it, what it does is it takes all the IP providers that are defined in the configuration file, will make a request to them. Right now I'm just having this I here because having 5 requests at once when I'm just developing is very excessive. But it does it, and then it will format its response and find the IP. And then here it basically adds it to a hash map, whose key is the IP address. And then the value is the integer, which is the amount of occurrences, and if it's seen twice or if it's seen more, it will add up to that. And then here we iterate through that hash map, and then checking which value is the largest value, and then we set it to those, and then we're able to return the key for that. Yeah, so let's go back here. I can actually make an example. So if I comment out this line and then redefine IP to be, let's say 0.0.0.0, a very default, then I would actually be confident running in this command. So if I run the test, basically you see here, it'll take whatever in my configuration file right here, take the subdomain of it, the star, and then the comment here, and then the value, which is obviously the IP address. So technically this would be the same all across. Other than that, I don't think there's too much I worked on or haven't worked on, sorry. And yeah, there's not much otherwise I would want to show. So yeah, this is again kind of almost like a incremental video. It isn't showing anything groundbreaking or revoluting, and I'm still kind of tired and a bit sick. So yeah. Okay, so thanks for watching again. The goal for next time is having proper create, read, update, and delete for the Cloudflare. So then after that's done, then it will be much easier to continue, or the rest of the project will be much easier because in a sense it's just using those functions. So yeah, have a good one. It's actually snowing here in Michigan, so I'm going to be quite excited for the snow like these people right here. Anyways, have a good one.